All right, Steve Thompson again. We're on chapter 12, ethics. We keep talking about the three main ethical theories. This chapter covers basically one of them. It's got some different names: Kantian ethics, deontological ethics. I like formalism, as in formality, as in the law. So this one will be pretty much focused on that particular theory. Developed by Immanuel Kant in the 1700s. And it's basically, we do what is right because it's right, because it is our duty. It's to look at the job and do it the right way all the time, period. We're not necessarily concerned with the outcome. We're not allowed, we'll make a chess reference. We're not allowed to use pawns. We're not allowed to sacrifice our pawns, because all people are equal. And they should be treated with the same level of dignity and respect. For instance, let's change that to today's criminal justice system. All people are considered equal under the law. We get all of us get equal constitutional protection, even from the worst possible criminal. I'm talking about the worst of the worst of society, people who harm children. The rules say that they get the same constitutional protections as everyone else. So there's no law out there, and I've seen this a lot. I'm a white male, if you didn't know this already. When somebody gets beat up, there's a concept out there of they deserved it, and the officer should be able to beat someone up. And that usually the person getting beat up is somebody who did not comply, and the police are like, well, if they only would have complied. And the people who see the person get beat up, sometimes beat to death, well, if only that person would have complied, they wouldn't have had the trouble. How about only if the police didn't beat people up, there wouldn't be trouble for no reason? How about if the woman would have just stayed at home? She wouldn't have been raped if she would have sat at home. So let's, we're blaming the victim for the actions of a police officer. Now, if you're one of those people, and I am actually one of those people, I'm going to throw myself under the bus here. I'm one of those people who see somebody do something bad, and I think they deserve to be punished. And I even have the desire to punish that person. But as a police officer, the rules don't allow us to do that. So if they change the rules to say, whoa, you can beat somebody up, you can kill them, shoot them, whatever, as long as they deserve it, then that's perfectly acceptable. I'll start retraining cops to say, hey, if he deserves it, handle your business. It's perfectly acceptable. Society, some people in society hold it as acceptable, and I don't. For police officers, like I said, I think somebody deserves sometimes what they get, but I also believe that police officers must be professional and follow the law. They're law enforcers, therefore we must also comply with the law. If you want to change the rules, again, I'll train officers where we don't change the rules. But until that time, when an officer raises their hand to support and defend the Constitution of the United States in the state of whatever they're in, Louisiana for us, it doesn't say unless they deserve it. So I am not willing to sacrifice that. And we'll switch that up. We're seeing video is really helping us understand it's not just poor people all the time. It's not just people of color. There's a new slogan out there that people are throwing around. It's called back the blue until it happens to you. And I back the blue through and through. As in, when I say back the blue, I mean police officers. But I'm also willing to step out and say, hey, this isn't right. This is not what we do. But we're seeing more and more people who back the blue, and then they're getting victimized as well. I've consulted on several cases. You can probably Google this one. I think it's a Galveston or maybe League City police over there in Texas. A man called his wife because the police showed up at her door. Somebody hit her in a parking lot. And they just exchanged information, which I don't know the laws in Texas, but in Louisiana, if you and I are involved in a traffic crash, parking lot or otherwise, and we exchange information and I leave the scene, it's not a hit and run. It's not a crime. You're allowed to do that. You don't necessarily have to stay there and get a police report, especially in a parking lot. In Louisiana, they don't even give police reports for parking lot crashes. She exchanged information. The insurance company found that, that it was his fault, the other person's fault, but the police showed up for whatever reason, and they wanted to talk to her about it. And apparently she called her husband, and her husband didn't like the way that she was being spoken to. He instructed her over the phone from hundreds of miles away not to talk to the police. And if they needed something, a search or whatever, they could get a warrant. And the police didn't like that. So the police did go get 2 arrest warrants, one for the wife for the accident, which she didn't do anything wrong. it wasn't even her fault, and she exchanged information, it's actually kind of doing a favor for the other guy. Because if I back into somebody in the parking lot and cause damage, and I file that on my insurance, it's going to cost me a lot more in my insurance rates. Well, if I can fix their car for $500 or $600 or even $1,000, which is about what the deductible is anyway, and somebody's willing to let me do that instead of filing it on insurance and putting a claim against my record, that's actually a kind of a big favor. A little risky too, because you gotta rely on that person to be willing to pay out of their own pocket. So with that said, they also arrested her husband for telling her not to talk to the police. They arrested him for obstruction. Of course, it goes to the district attorney, and they immediately dropped the case. This case is dumb. But this is a man and woman who had never been arrested in their lives, always been, thought police were good and ethical and did it within the limits of the law, but this time they didn't, and it was upon them. They thought, oh, this couldn't happen to us. We comply, which actually they didn't comply. They just simply exercised their Fifth Amendment right, which that can never be used against you. A lot of police officers, I see them get offended when someone says, yes, I have First Amendment constitutional rights, and I'd like to exercise those. As in, if somebody asks an officer or an officer asks somebody a question on the side of the road, like, why were you speeding? Well, if you were to answer that question, you are giving a confession. You're telling them, well, I was speeding, admitting to the crime because I was late for work or whatever. Some people will say, I don't want to answer your question, and police will find that as a non-cooperative, argumentative, even hostile, when the demeanor is simply calm, cool, and collected. And what it means is there's a document out there. I'm just gonna see if I can find just a blank piece of paper. I can live without one of these here. I'll just use a Post-it note. How about that? So we're going to pretend this Post-it note is the United States Constitution. It's a protected document that's on display in our nation's capital. But this is what this represents, what this country was founded upon. The flag is beautiful. I strap it to my body and I jump out of airplanes in front of thousands of people, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people, to show my pride for the flag. And I've served in the military. But the flag is not this country. It's not what makes this country. The Constitution makes this country. And when someone is asked a question without their lawyer, but they have the right to remain silent, and they decide to waive that right, they take those constitutional rights and they throw them away. It's not disrespectful. They just are okay with giving those up, and that's a personal choice. But this document is very, very, very powerful. I'm going to open it back up and tell you that if someone decides to exercise any of these constitutional rights, they were written for a reason. Forced confessions that are prevented by the Fifth Amendment, denial of counsel, representation. There's a reason that was written in the Constitution. There's a reason there's a Fourth Amendment to prevent unreasonable searches and seizures. So what's happening is, because they're not throwing away this very, very important document, they're seeing that as hostile and people are being treated badly for it. So this gentleman in Texas simply told his wife to exercise her rights. She exercised her rights, and they punished her for it. They went there with a warrant for both of them. They had 3 children at home, all underage. They said, what about our children? The police took them away, leaving them completely unsupervised, and said, they'll be all right. And then they booked them in jail overnight before they got out. They have filed, I believe, a $50 million lawsuit. But these are people who respected the police their entire lives. They have good jobs. They live in a nice neighborhood. They've never been arrested. They have access to funds and attorneys, obviously. But they're thinking, I back the blue. I back the blue till it happens to you. And I'm sad to say that that's a reality. I've seen too many people come to me personally, or I've consulted on too many cases involving good people. I've seen innocent people get arrested, and they have to fight to try to get some sense of justice and prevent it from happening to somebody else. And sometimes they can't even get that. The police circle the wagons and they fight. So I took that off on a little tangent there, but it comes down to respecting the Constitution. If we want to give cops the right to ignore the Constitution in certain circumstances, I fully support that. But we got to write that down. You got to change that Constitution, and they haven't done that. So, moving on. There is a group out there who can decide that, we'll say an officer loses control and beats somebody up really bad. Or, doesn't have to be an officer. Let's change it to a father catches a man raping his daughter. He catches the man, stops the rape in progress, and then beats the man to death. that is a crime. It's second-degree murder. It happened in Calcasieu Parish several years ago. Caught the man sexually assaulting his daughter, beat him up pretty good, let him go, went and got a buddy, went back as he was attempting to escape, got him again. So we had a cool down period. And they beat him to death. That's a second-degree murder. It went to a jury. A jury can decide, whether it's a police officer or a person in society, that you don't deserve to be punished, that the subject deserved it. So if we're going to take that risk, the law says the jury can do that. The jury never has to convict. So the jury has that power within the limits of the Constitution. Police officers don't. So they don't get to say, I'm gonna respect everybody's Fourth Amendment rights, which means you can't beat them up, you can't beat them to death or anything like that without constitutional justification unless they deserve it. We're not giving police officers that authority. And I'm not willing to give that authority to police officers right now. I respect the jury's lawful right to do that, and they have that. And I would hope if I'm on a jury and I was in that situation, I might find the person not guilty as well. I tell a little joke of a story. This might make you laugh, but Snoop Dogg, Calvin Broadus, who was booked into jail in Calcasieu Parish many years ago, has been tried and found not guilty on numerous offenses throughout his career. And every time he's found not guilty. But every time after he's found not guilty, he goes back to the jury and invites them to his house for a party. So I can tell you unequivocally, unless Snoop Dogg beat some baby seals or hurt a kid or something, I'm probably going to find him not guilty as well, because I can't think of anything cooler than going to party at Snoop Dogg's house after the jury trial. So just by me saying that, I would be excluded from the jury, but maybe I'll get lucky and get on one, or maybe Snoop Dogg won't get in trouble anymore or get arrested anymore. So moving on, it's deontological ethics, Kantian ethics, formalism. That's what we're talking about. When I talk about those three main theories, it's formalism. It's doing it. It's what you do, how you do it. It doesn't really matter the outcome. Is it within the rules? Is it within morality? So even if it does result in a negative outcome. So moving on, I am just glancing through the chapter 12. I did say that right. Chapter 12, ethics. And I'm going to jump. All persons are respected, even criminals, okay? As in, when I say respected, I'm not saying you have to tell a child molester yes or no, sir. I'm telling you that all people are still human beings, and our rules state that basically they must treat it as such, even if they're executed, until the needle goes into the arm or until they put the bag over the head to do a firing squad or whatever. They're still treated as human beings up until the point that they're deceased, and then of course that's the end of that. No one forfeits their constitutional rights, and there's some confusion on that. Oh, well, wait a minute, somebody in prison, they don't have rights. For instance, they can, if you're in prison, a guard can open your door, walk in, make you get out, and search everything in your room without a warrant at any point. They can't do that to your house. But that prisoner still has constitutional rights. You're like, no, that's no constitutional rights. It's just a lesser expectation of privacy, but they still have Fourth Amendment rights. For instance, the officer can't go in and do a body cavity search every day invasively, as in without, a warrant. Doctors conducted by a doctor. When I mean a body cavity search, I mean, basically entering the human body to get something they think might be hidden there. The corrections officer can't check for that every day or at all, actually. That would be a violation. But going in and shaking down the room without any proof whatsoever, that is perfectly acceptable. They still have constitutional rights, no matter what. They are never, ever all gone. This is just a little pet peeve that bugs me. I ask this question to my cops all the time, that I'm training. Is driving a privilege or a right? And a lot of people say it is a privilege, and that's not true. So a privilege is something that, like, if my kid has an iPad, I paid for that iPad, I bought that iPad, and the child is not right now, my child, he's nine years old. I can go take that iPad away because it's a privilege. All right, I have the authority to take that away. The police will tell people that driving is a privilege when it's not. You can't go take that away. If they meet the elements of the law, driving privileges are written in the law. If they meet it, they're allowed to drive. There's nobody at the DMV that can say, yeah, I don't think I'll give you this license. I just don't think you deserve it. It's a privilege, not a right. Have a nice day. They can't do that. The law says what the law says. If they are medically able to drive, then they're allowed to drive. If they pass the vision test, they're allowed to drive. If they pass the written test, they're allowed to drive. If they don't meet the statute, then, but that's not a privilege, it is a right. You can't take away somebody's right to drive. Even I did this on numerous occasions. I would pull somebody over, and usually somebody very elderly, their capacities were becoming diminished with age, and I would see a problem. Like, they couldn't figure out how to dim the lights. They couldn't maintain their lane. There was no impairment. It was just age related. And I was not allowed to take away their driving privileges. What I was allowed to do is recommend that they be reevaluated. And I would send, it's called the driver behavior form. So I did it probably 3 or 4 times in my career as a trooper. And I would send that, and the DMV would contact them, or even wait till their next test and say, hey, we need to make sure and check your eyes real good, make sure you're medically acceptable to drive. So, but driving is not a privilege, it's a right. So, taking that away would obviously be a violation of formalism. Not going to go through the case studies on chapter 11 and 12, but I would encourage you to look at those. Applying deontological theory or formalism. What are your available courses of action? Somebody jumps out of a car and pulls a gun on a police officer. What are the courses of action? The officer can engage in a gun battle immediately. Possibly the officer gets killed, possibly the suspect gets killed, possibly both die. The right answer is, depending on the circumstances. I know a particular trooper, he pulled over a vehicle that was supposedly had pulled a gun on somebody else, a big gun, an AK-47. He kept a good bit of distance to make sure he was safe and be able to pull out his long gun. Well, as soon as the vehicle hit the shoulder, he jumped out with an AK-47. The trooper didn't have time to get his long gun out, a rifle or a shotgun, and he decided the best course of action was to drop it in reverse and back up, create distance. That probably saved both their lives at that point, or at least one of their lives, because somebody was about to die. Somebody was about to die in a gun battle. So, but the trooper was given 2 choices: tactical retreat and survive, or get involved in a gun battle, and most likely somebody's going to end up dying, even if it was a fake gun. So, applying, whether to arrest somebody. And you think, oh, well, it's easy to figure out whether you arrest somebody. They committed a crime, they didn't. You may walk into a situation where a woman appears to have been abused by her husband. The husband denies it. The woman denies it. She says she fell. But he's got a bloody knuckle, and she's got a black eye or a bleeding eye. And then she begs you not to arrest him, because if you arrest him, they're barely making their rent. They're on the verge of being evicted. They got to pay their rent tomorrow. He's going to get his check tomorrow and pay it, and that won't be kicked out of their home and homeless, not only with her and her 2 children. So it becomes not so easy at that point, because she will not cooperate whatsoever. But the officer does have the authority to make that arrest. The officer is lawfully required to make that arrest if he or she has probable cause to believe that a domestic abuse battery has occurred. So, what's the right thing to do? The law says you must make the arrest, you make the arrest, and then the outcome later is she's evicted, she's homeless, the children are homeless, they're sleeping in a homeless shelter, and one of the kids gets molested by another member of the homeless shelter, by another resident. That's worst possible case scenario. So you put all that together. For instance, I worked a child rape case involving a 13 or 14-year-old girl that was being molested and raped by a gentleman, and the mother or the wife, who knew what was going on. I'm sorry, she didn't know. She just ignored the warning signs because he was the breadwinner of the family. And she was so furious with the police, me personally, because we arrested her. And she never said he didn't do it or anything like that. It was obvious that he did it. It was, he has to work and give us money to take care of this home, because she was at home and didn't work. And furious. And there were other children in the home. So, there's no easy way around it. Obviously, the right thing to do was to arrest the rapist, and he went to prison, but that was hard on the rest of the family. So, applying formalism, though, the mentality is that you shouldn't really have a dilemma. It should just be easy. What are the rules? As long as the rules are ethical, obviously. If you have a broken law, like a law that allows slavery, that's another story. So, and do your duties conflict? Like I just said, you don't want the children to be homeless. And you can say, oh, well, they can just go to a homeless shelter, there's foster care and all that. Trust me, from somebody who grew up in that environment, foster care, getting taken by the government because parents go into jail or drug addiction, alcoholism, whatever, it's not an easy life for a child. There's no easy fix to, oh, well, we'll make sure the child is taken care of. It's not a great environment. Some of those group homes you go into, the staff are, luckily for me, the staff were not sexually assaultive or child molesters, but they were definitely not nice people. They are just getting paid and could be physically cruel and borderline barbaric, and they were just house children like myself. I've been in a group home several times as a I think the last one I was in, I was probably 12 years old when I was in my last group home. After that, they started, when they would take parents away for whatever reason, they would always give us the option of going to stay with a friend. And that was so much better than actually going to those homes, because they were not the nicest places, but they did buy us new clothes every time we get there. So that was actually kind of cool. And it was at Walmart. So I was like, wow, we're going to buy new clothes and not go to the thrift store where they smell bad, they never fit right. But that wasn't one nice part of it. The government got money to take us or the government gave the group home to take each one of us shopping. And so I got to get new clothes. So that was nice, because my parents just couldn't afford the clothes. So, all right. The appropriate course of action is you weigh all options and which one's better, whether it's a shooting, whether it's writing a ticket, whether it's what to stop people for. If you're stopping people because they don't have an inspection sticker and in a poor neighborhood, that's an issue. I believe that's an issue. I don't believe that really makes a difference. And I'll put it in perspective for you, where there's kind of a conflict of doing the right thing the right way, the right reason. When I was a state trooper, I was required to write 6 tickets a day, and that's it. Arrest a drunk every pay period, there's 24 pay periods in a year. That's what they wanted. That was very easy for me. I'd arrest sometimes 3 in a day, on a day shift sometimes. Night shift, it was easy to get 2 or 3. I led the state police in Troop D area, Southwest Louisiana, every year I was on patrol. 6 tickets a day. So other troopers might go out and I would write, I didn't care about the 6 tickets a day. I would end up with a lot more than that anyway, but I would go out and sit on the interstate, and if I wanted 6 tickets really, really fast, you catch people 13 miles an hour over, about every third, fourth car is going to be going 13 miles an hour over the speed limit on the interstate. You're not going to sit there with your radar for more than 3 or 4 minutes before you've got one. I would change that number based on the speed, kind of the average speed, the higher average speed of the day. I would basically say, what speed can I get if I sit here for a half an hour? And I'd start that number out at, we'll say if the speed limit was 60, I'd start that number out at 85, 25 over. There were days I wouldn't stop a car unless it was going over 100. Sometimes there's just days, Fridays, people are just going fast. And so I could sit there and write 90, 95, 100 or better all day long. But you had to sit there and wait. But there was other troopers who would meet that 6 ticket objective. They write the first six people they catch speeding, boom, 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 and they're done for the day. Sometimes even go home. There were some troopers that were arrested for that, and it made the news. It was a big mess. But that was what they were trained to do by supervision, and some of those supervisors are still there. None of those supervisors were actually punished. The troopers were punished, and they knew it was and the supervisors knew it was happening, but they got almost zero punishment. Only one got punished, but that was another story. But back to, I switched to gaming operations, which is a Bureau of Investigation position. So they gave us another statistical objective, and they say, we call it quotas. The law says quotas are not allowed. You're not allowed to have a quota. You're not allowed to incentivize in any way arrests, require a certain number of arrests, or anything like that. It's in the law. Problem with the law is a law without a punishment is not a law. And that law says, thou shalt not do this, but it gives zero punishment. So it's not really a law. It's just like, we really don't want you to do this, but there's absolutely no punishment. I mean, literally, you say, okay, this trooper, whatever, committed this crime. I guess you could technically arrest the department, the supervision, the law enforcement officers. You take them to jail, you go to trial, you get found guilty. The judge looks at the law and says, well, you're guilty, but your punishment is, there is no punishment. So obviously no one would ever be taken to trial for that. But back to my point is, I went to Plainclothes, which is Bureau of Investigations, and I started working major cases like felony embezzlement cases. I would even do some sex crimes associated, anything with the gaming industry. Animal fighting. I did the largest animal fight in the history of law enforcement to my knowledge, and so I'll share this with you. This is my home office. This is my rooster that I kept from that rooster fight. There were 600 birds there, 400 spectators, and so forth. So anyway, I worked major cases. But the rule was they wanted 1 arrest per month. So that's all I had to give them. And I didn't care about quotas. Quotas don't matter to me. If you work hard, that's it. And I enjoyed working hard. So, but other people in my section, they said, well, okay, you want 1 arrest per month. And it didn't matter for them if it was a misdemeanor or a felony. You couldn't go out and work traffic. That was different. You had to work some type of gaming related. You had to tie it to the casino, which you can tie prostitution, human trafficking, drug trafficking, just about everything, money laundering. It was all in the casino. So it was so easy, and it didn't have to be at the casino. I could take people who went to the casino and then went and bought drugs in Texas, and that was it, so they just wanted some tie to it. So some of my colleagues would get their 1 arrest per month. Understand that, that's 12 arrests per year. And so the way they would do that is they would call human resources and say, give me a list of everybody that works at this particular casino. And it'd be 2,000 people. They take that list to a dispatcher and say, hey, while you're sitting here not doing anything, they're not chatting on the radio or whatever, I want you to start running these names and dates of birth until you find me a list, we'll say 20 people. You'll get 20 people on the list that had warrants for traffic. Okay, people who don't pay traffic tickets usually just don't have the money, and you're supposed to, if you get a ticket, you're supposed to pay it. That's just the way it is. But sometimes you might get a ticket from Woodworth. Woodworth is a despicable organization, police, who harasses their citizens and everybody that drives through the town, and they're writing tickets for revenue generation. If you don't believe me, I have a very good example. It's called Parker v. Woodworth. Miss Parker was stopped illegally, no justification. Once she was stopped, they realized she was working at the church, where they stopped her on the driveway to the church, private property. The church said, well, I understand, and her license was suspended. She paid her tickets, but she didn't pay the reinstatement fee. So she had her license with her, but it wasn't valid at the time. So understandably, while the officer should have never even made the stop, he finds out that her license is suspended. So again, anything that happened after a bad stop can't be used, but okay, write her a ticket for driving under suspension. He didn't do that. He ended up writing her I think 6 tickets, one of which was for presenting the driver's license to him. He said that's unlawful use. So not only was it suspended, he wrote her for that, but unlawful use or possession, which is, I'm sorry, but like I said, I believe that was a retired state trooper. I'm not going to say his name. But you're just a despicable human being if you write a little old lady 6 tickets working at a church cafeteria who just can't afford it. She also presented him registration and insurance. He wrote her for no registration. She had it. Why would despicable? She presented the insurance from the vehicle. It wasn't her car. He looked at that and says, if you don't have a good driver's license, you can't have insurance. So he wrote her a ticket for no insurance. Despicable human being. You are a piece of garbage if you take advantage of your society that way. This video is on YouTube. They can show it to Woodworth Police Department. I will be careful not to drive through there because of this. But, this is an officer who's in a department who's basically saying, we're going to write everybody for everything we possibly can, tow as many cars as we can. They towed her car, even though the church personnel said, hey, she can park it here and the registered owner can come and get it. No. They took it, they impounded it, and put a hold on it and said even the owner could not come and get it. Well, the owner had to call state police. State police had to say, you can't steal people's cars, stupid. And they made them let it go. They made them let the car go. But anyway, Miss Parker received 6 citations, I believe, only one of which was okay, driving under suspension. No traffic violations. He pulled her over just to see what she was doing. He didn't know who this woman was. It turned out she was black. So why is this black woman on my road driving around and I don't know who she is? I'm going to go find out. So I'm going to light her up, illegal detention, and then anything that resulted from that is unlawful. Anything discovered from that is subject to the exclusionary rule. But he writes her 6 tickets. Again, this is a despicable human being, a despicable department, and they should disband the entire organization until they find their moral compass, because all the money they get from those tickets, they keep it for the city. They pay their own salaries. Okay, I'll get off my horse on that. Anyway, they go through all that. She can't afford the tickets. She tells the mayor, who's the judge, who says you need to pay these tickets. He agrees with them. Of course he agrees with them. The money's literally going into his coffers to support his city. So of course he's going to support it. And then when she can't pay it, they end up serving a warrant on her and keep her in jail for 25 days. A poor little old black woman on his road, and he gonna find out why she's there. No reason for the stop. Again, zero knowledge of the constitutional limitations placed on law enforcement officers. They call them check them out stops in the appellate case. Parker v. Woodward. They took the case to the circuit court, the local court, the court above the city court or magistrate court, whatever it's called, where the mayor is in charge, and they threw the case out. Well, the city of Woodworth appealed it, and I believe it's a 17-page court ruling. Look up Parker v. Woodworth. It is riveting. It calls them racist, and it basically says that they're all, at least this particular officer and their system, they're despicable human beings, and they should have never done it to this woman. I'm gonna basically give it the equivalent of I'm not gonna use bad words, but a slap this way and this way. And the city of Woodworth, after that destruction by the appellate court, the Louisiana Court of Appeals, they had the audacity to say, we're taking this to the Louisiana Supreme Court and we're gonna win. They didn't. They didn't. It was terrible. So anyway, this that's a statistical, or you're getting your tickets, you're generating revenue, but you're not helping society. You're not doing the right thing. You're basically an abuse of power, just taking money from people who can't afford it. Especially when you write 6 tickets to a little old lady who you shouldn't have even stopped in the first place. So, and make up the laws and try to keep the vehicle with a hold. God, I mean, I would call that theft of an automobile. Back to the state troopers who did that, they would get their list of people who had warrants. They couldn't afford the tickets. But they were working at the casino. They might be a dealer. They might be working in the hotel. They might be, doing just a labor job, and that might be all they're capable of, and that's great, or they might be working their way up to their next job or going to school, whatever. But this trooper would get this list of people who didn't pay their traffic tickets, and he wouldn't even go get them at home. He'd just say, hey, human resources, when are they coming to work? So they come to work and he'd arrest them when they showed up for work. He didn't even have to leave his office. Do a little paperwork, take them over to the jail, book them in, done. He had to do that once a month. So when he did that once a month, he just sat on the list until the next month. And if the person didn't work anymore, go to the next person, pick them up on a traffic warrant. There's just 12 arrests per year. And you're thinking, well, what did he do with the rest of his time? I'll tell you what he did with the rest of his time. Netflix and video games, because that's all he did in the office. And the supervisors were perfectly acceptable with it. I was not. I didn't like it. I even asked one of these particular troopers for help on a child rapist that I was trying to capture, and he was 30 feet away from the child rapist. Wouldn't put his fork down from his lunch and stop watching his video games or Netflix to go over there and deal with it. I was not at the location. I called and said, hey, I need help. I'm on my way, but he wouldn't even put it down. So that's we'll say the lack of formalism. Or actually, it's kind of in compliance with formalism, but it doesn't result in anything. That was within the rules, but there was no sense of duty whatsoever. So it was just, let me get my numbers and I'm done. Same organization. I was required to do inspections to maintain the integrity of the table games in the casinos. So I was supposed to watch a casino table for an hour, 2 hours, whatever, and look and make sure that everything was happening the way it was supposed to. The dealer was doing all their stuff and all that. And I'll be honest with you, I absolutely hated it. It would take away from my duties of stuff that I needed to be doing, such as major criminal cases. And the surveillance operators in the casino, they had a vested interest in making sure everything was going the way it was supposed to be going, so they would do their own audits and do that. I'm not going to say which supervisor it was, but my supervisor at the time said, hey, I know you don't like doing these. I did them. He said, I know you don't like doing these, but don't worry about it. Don't do them. Just write down that you did. That's all I need from you. I need the report. I was like, okay. I never did that, but that was what I was told. That told me how important or the lack of importance of what we were doing. But chain of command wanted these inspections. They wanted to write down we did X many, and that was it. So this is basically a chapter focused on formalism, doing the way we do things. The outcome doesn't necessarily matter. So, but And then sometimes you'll see, even when you're in compliance with the rules, such as you're allowed to write a ticket to anybody for anything. Well, not like Woodworth PD did with Miss Parker. Again, please read Parker v. Woodworth. It is riveting, and you'll love, like I said, you'll see it this way and this way, the slap on how they destroyed the way they treated Miss Woodworth. And hopefully that will put the brakes on them doing it again. But I need to make sure I don't drive through there again, especially if this gets released. Enjoy your time. Enjoy your day. I'm going to go. I'll see you in chapter 13.